How tired is Mike, you say? So tired he hasn't noticed I took off my beard for the first time in nearly a decade, but actually so tired he's throwing us back all together into his traumatic past so we could all experience his mistakes. Today, we are talking about Deep Space Nine, Season 5, Episode 8, Things Past. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Keith and Mike Watch Deep Space Nine. Today we're talking about Season 5, Episode 8, Things Past, and Mike is performing now. How many shows a week?
It's only 6 this week. We start 8 for the next couple weeks, but
6 to 8 shows a week in Forever Plaid as the star and director of Forever Plaid. So I will let you go because sold my beard freeness for the first time ever.
Yeah, is there a reason? Do you have something going on, or there's got to be a reason?
The reason is I was, Mike got to be 19 the minute he shaved and dyed his hair, and I would like to be a slightly less hairy 44-year-old. So
you just thought it was time?
I just thought, what the hell? It was just fun. It's been so long. I was just curious what's all under here.
Yeah.
And
it's nice for a minute. It's nice for a minute. I hate shaving. I hate it. I really hate it.
Oh, you mean I thought you were saying,
oh, yours?
Yeah, Keith, yeah, that looks nice for a minute. You're going to grow it back, right?
No, I feel the same way. So I hate shaving. We've discussed this many times. And for this show, because there's a stark difference between beard color and hair color at this moment, I have to shave every morning. But since we had off Monday, Tuesday, I've had 48 hours of no beard, but I shaved last night, and this is how fast my beard grows. So it's
you're a very hairy fellow.
Hirsute, I think is the word.
I think said manly. We're gonna go with that. But for me, I've worn a beard ever since I got jowls, and so this is like the vulnerability that I'm showing here.
You're telling me that there was no real actual reason you shaved?
I did it because of it was fun. Okay. I had no other reason.
Did you instantly regret it, or did you feel like, I'm okay with this? Did you do a clean shave? That's the question. Or did you do a buzzer?
Well, I did a buzzer into a clean shave.
That's ballsy, because sometimes I'll do a reset with the buzzer, but the clean shave invites breaking out. It invites weird sweating. It invites
weird sweating,
razor rash, all the things that one hates.
Side effects of a clean shave include priapism. I thought I was gonna hate it more than I do.
This is great summertime because you get a good base layer of tan.
Get a base layer. Just like, as long as I'm always looking up, it's not terrible. I just if I drop something, all of a sudden I turn into Jabba the Hutt. Like it's bad. All right. Anyway, this has been your shaving podcast here with Keith and Mike. Because Mike has nothing better to do. Because you also work your full-time job.
Yeah, I'm catching up. But you know what? It's funny because usually work stress is the stress of my life. But since I've been so stressed out with the other stuff, just doing regular work today has felt almost relaxing.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's been very interesting. But I'm actually catching up on my sleep. I know it doesn't appear that way, but I am catching up. And I think I'll be probably back by tomorrow, even though then it's the first two-do shave tomorrow. So we'll see.
Oh, that'll be fun. Well, I can't wait to come see the show.
Yeah, man, it really turned out pretty great. We only got one review, which is probably for the best, but it was like a very hyperbolic review, which really oversold. Talk about me no-selling. This oversold.
Okay.
I believe it said that I...
pull quotes?
Yes. I'll give you the best pull quote.
Yeah.
Indeglio, who directs this 90-minute masterpiece, also decided to star in it. And I'm like, yes! Pull it! Now, he could be referring to Forever Plaid as a masterpiece, which I believe that it is. But in its context, it feels like it's almost referencing my version of it, which really...
Or he took this 90-minute masterpiece and chose to star in it as well as direct. So he's now
it was very glowing. I suspect they paid for it, but hard to say.
Well, we are sex worker positive. We're also review worker positive.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
That's how this works. All right. So speaking of things that aren't necessarily positive, but we're gonna find out.
Man, we do have to sit through this now.
We have to. We have to hear we're not going to sit through it. We are going to engaging with your thoughts on last week's episode. Let he who is without sin. I'm going to throw some stones here. And here is what you had to say. Mike, if you want me to read your YouTube comment, how does one do that?
Well, if you want to hear how badly Keith reads, this is a great opportunity. All you have to do is leave a thought on the YouTube with a super tip or super thanks, depending on the day. Or you could join the few, the proud, the less than few, in fact, patrons at patreon.com/KandM. Let us know how you feel about each episode every week as we watch or as we review, and we'll let the YouTube viewers know. As Keith.
And it's a home literacy test for me. This is my cognitive test to see whether or not I can run for president.
Bird shit.
Ice cream.
Chair.
The elephant. I totally could tell the elephant. It was amazing. It was a good.
My mom, who is turning 80 this year, Keith, or 79. Towards 80. She's 80 adjacent. She had a fall, as you may recall, maybe a month ago, and so she's having an occupational therapist and a physical therapist come to the house. And Jen went over to be with her for one of those appointments, and they do the cognitive test for all seniors. So she got the hamburger pencil crayon test as well. And not only do they ask you it in the beginning, then just like randomly throughout the PTs, they'll be like, hey, what were those words again? And she'll be like, hamburger, sponge.
Hamburger. The hamburger. We're all praying for the hamburger from the sky. All right. So here is what you had to say about Let He Who Is Without Sin. Joshua Cronin comes in with a happy birthday, Keith. I just failed my cognitive
on brand, as advertised.
I got my own name wrong.
That was awesome.
Can you read your own name? Hamburger. No, all right. He says, glad you are back. Truly miss hearing you weekly. This episode is a weird one. Seems out of place for Deep Space Nine. I don't hate it, but I don't like it. I think the writers had their other intentions for this episode, and it wasn't delivered. So weird, Monty Markham playing such a tightwad conservative when he was Blanche's gay brother on Golden Girls. Yeah, talk about, progressive before its time. Golden Girls stands up. Anyway, I don't ever skip episodes. I'm a true Deep Space Nine fan, but I may, have my phone in hand and scrolling Facebook while this is on. 70 self-sealing stem bolts from me, Joshua Cronin. Generous. I like it. Jason Moe says the Kings have returned. Happy birthday to you, Hamburger. You don't look a day older, sir. Mike, you, on the other hand, somehow look 20 years younger this week as a result of your de-aging wizardry. You guys summed up almost every bad thing about this episode. But the worst thing about it, the thing I still harbor so much resentment about 3 decades later, is this. The preceding episode, Trials and Tribulations, was truly a TV event with a huge build-up and hype around it at the time, even amongst the mainstream media. Many lapsed Trekkies who had given up on Deep Space Nine way back in Season 1 tuned in for the Tribbles episode and were treated to a masterpiece and a taste of greatness that is Deep Space Nine.
A 90-minute masterpiece, Keith?
No. Oh, yeah, no, sorry. Somehow he decided to put himself as the star. Mike's playing Sisko? That feels wrong. Feels very wrong. But
more or less wrong than the Pope, Keith. I'm just talking to pull quotes. Mike's getting involved.
Stop trying to mess up my cognitive test. I want to be president.
You're right.
Anyway, so here's...
I'd vote for you, buddy. 100%.
Oh, thanks. Thank you.
I'd then move directly to Canada.
Fair enough. So Jason makes a terrific point. We got to let him make it. He says, then to follow, everybody's watching. So then to follow that up with this turd of an episode just instantly threw away all of that goodwill, and many of those returning fans immediately jumped ship again. The only good thing to come out of this episode is that it just begs for a patron watch-along of the Next Generation episode Justice. Am I right? 19 STEM. Well, that's the one we had all those naked pictures, Mike.
Yeah, I know, but I was thinking that our watch-alongs become a little overly horny on a good day. So if you give us a horny episode, I don't know what's gonna happen.
Oh, it's nice that you used the watch-alongs are unnecessarily and aggressively horny. Mike, there's only one person on the watch-alongs. It's just you, buddy.
Yeah, calls it like I sees it. Hamburger, booby.
Hamburger. All right, ask me at the end if I remember all the words.
Butt plug, hamburger, and booby. Hard to forget.
That's a patron-only joke.
Oh yeah, God. my bad. I'm talking about Horgons.
Yeah. All right. YouTube viewer comes in with these thoughts. There were 4 things I liked about this episode.
Okay.
The backstory for Worf's childhood tragedy is a great character arc. Mm-hmm. The Bajoran breakup ritual was good world building. I like to see Rom's story arc progress. Mm-hmm. And the weather control was interesting sci-fi. I agree with all of that.
It did it better than Scooby-Doo, but...
There were many flaws in this episode. Rather than just list them all, I will focus on what in my mind, is the biggest flaw. The Essentialists are dumb villains, both in universe and in the literary sense. Starfleet are hyper-competent geniuses with saint-like morality, but most Federation civilians are pretty worthless, unless they are scientists. The few competent Federation civilians we see are mostly criminals or Maquis rebels. This has long bugged me. The existentialists are correct that the Federation civilians are not particularly ready to handle an attack from the Jem'Hadar or the Borg or the Klingons or the Romulans. I think that's a fantastic point.
Yes.
I am well acquainted to the 7 deadly sins, but there is a lot of overlap between the 7 deadly sins and my favorite things to do. Agreed as well.
That's a Venn diagram I think we all share.
Yeah, indeed. The sin of lust can lead to many problems, but none of those problems would make a population particularly susceptible to outside invaders. The Essentialists want to help the Federation deal with its sloth problem, so they stage a lame, ineffectual protest on the Lust planet. That is really dumb. In fact, I would say the Essentialists have a sloth problem because they were very lazy about their plan. The Federation sloth problem comes from the holodecks and the replicators. Risa doesn't use holodecks or replicators. Everything there is real. The Risians are actually hardworking and industrious. Even the tourists are not slothful. The weakest and laziest Federation citizens are not going to Risa. Lazy horn dogs, Mike, are going to the holodecks. Hardworking horn dogs are making the effort to meet new people and bang them. So, this is like my favorite comment in a long time.
I mean, it's well thought out.
It's
so on brand for us that it is really chef's kiss.
It really explains a lot. Add on that Quark is not a Federation citizen. In fact, by context, a lot of Risa's visitors are not Federation citizens, given that they are Ferengi, that other Ferengi like to go there, and even the Cardassians talk about it. So does the Orion Syndicate. Ruining the vacations of non-Federation citizens won't help the existentialist cause. I don't know how to write a nice sex-positive episode of Star Trek, but I'm pretty sure a sex-positive story doesn't involve a story about an accidental fatality at a Little League soccer game. For awarding STEM bolts, I compare this episode to my least favorite Deep Space Nine episodes.
Unless that soccer game was sexy.
A Little League soccer game? No. What are you talking about? I'm moving on.
What if... No, I can fix it. I can fix it.
Do you want a shovel so you can keep digging?
No, it's not the soccer game proper, Keith, the Little League soccer game. It's during the commercials when they do that Bud Light commercial. It's like, and twins.
Wow. Mike is out there like hitting on soccer moms right and left. Sarah Palin
was
is
that
out
on
there.
this show, or was that out of practice that we did the end twins bit
And
for like
I
20
think
minutes?
it was this show. I think it was this show. I think somebody specifically complained about it.
Oh, that we did it too much.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
It
I'm glad-
Mike, people don't complain because we didn't do stuff enough.
Yeah, that's true.
I guarantee you that.
Well, it's just my real life that people complain about it being too little. Okay.
Indeed. For awarding STEM bolts, I compared this episode to my least favorite Deep Space Nine episodes, and I realized this wasn't even in the bottom 10. There are a few episodes which I refuse to watch again, and this is not one of them. At the very least, this episode has some good one-liners and character growth. I give this episode 42 self-sealing STEM bolts in honor of Keith's birthday. Yeah, there's a rumor going on in the comments that I'm 42.
I say run with it, buddy.
Sure. Do you know? Oh, we're just going off there. Phil Simms, the greatest football player ever to play in human history.
Okay.
When he was a rookie in 1979, in one of the first press releases that went out, somebody
They said he was
screwed up and
42?
said no. They said he was a year younger than he was, and he had the forethought as a rookie to be like, yeah, that's my birthday.
Just roll with it?
So when he retired at the age of 38, he was actually 39, and he didn't admit that until years after he retired.
Well,
So it was a bank error in his favor. So there you go. I'm taking it. I'm 42. Right, ladies? Okay. JD says, "Hey, gents, I listened to you while working on building my new pantry. Cool. I have a lot to say about this one, but I will save that treat for something special. Wanted to get you some more interactions on your video. You know, I like the character stuff in this episode, but the plot is flimsy. 75 self-sealing stem bolts." And JD sent me something for my birthday. I don't know what it is. Ooh, Mike, did you get one too? I'm really excited. I don't know what it is. I opened it so that we could open it, but I guess we're gonna wait till...
and coming out the top is a note, and I didn't even read the note yet.
Oh, I read the note, but it's not. There's no spoilers. So I guess we're gonna open that on toys. Is that what we're gonna do? Or are we gonna open it now? What are we doing?
Why don't we do it after we record this? Then we have an episode of toys.
Okay, great. There it is. All right, Harry Pothead says, this one's good. If my cat brought this episode to me and dropped it in my lap, I would say, "No, Oliver, this is a very bad episode, and I don't like very bad episodes. Now take it to the garbage and throw it away. People also bring me the Lysol so I can spray disinfectant all over me to get the stink off. I have a very capable cat." Yeah, but Charlie does not do any of those things. 20 stem bolts. They continue, "I don't believe Worf is that much of a stick in the mud. I don't believe he would turn nerdy terrorist because Dr. Bashir and Lita are a little freaky for his taste." That's funny. "It would make more sense, honestly, if Quark was the one getting all stinky about empowered females walking around, or if they would have, for some unfathomable reason, brought Odo along." Great points.
That's actually an excellent point. We didn't talk about how, if all people, Quark was so ready to get his sunbathing and freak on, and yet not once had a problem with any of the female positive dominance over there.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, all of the authority figures on Ryza are female, at least that we've seen. It's a good point. Good point. Worf's Boot Shivs very simply says, "Hoo boy! Next episode."
Yep,
45
thanks for being succinct.
self-sealing
Yeah.
stem bolts. Yes. Kevin Miles says, "Happy birthday, Keith. This episode reminds me of an early Next Generation episode. Move Along Home is a far better episode than this one. I give it 75 self-sealing stem bolts. The 100 self-sealing stem bolts I gave Trials and Tribulations is one of 3 Deep Space Nine episodes I would give 100 to. Deep Space... Oh, yeah, because we asked, is it you have 3 out of all of Trek? No, it's 3 Deep Space Nine gets 100. There are a few in the original series and maybe 3 in Next Gen." Hibernation Pod says, new patron, welcome.
Yeah, welcome.
Says, "Not going to say much on this episode. The only part that interested me really is the story Worf told to explain why he is this way. It fits into the series, and gives him more depth. A depth I can totally relate to, as I am very much the same. I have always held myself back, but in my youth, my addiction unleashed a part of me that was the complete opposite. I was without restraint and a train wreck waiting to happen. I hurt a lot of people along the way. Without the drink, though, I was similar to Worf. Few of words and even less of smiles, never to draw attention to myself. It seemed to be if I let loose, even for that one moment, it was too much. However, this whole episode hardly interested me. I do get Fullerton's mission. Our complacency can certainly lead to our own undoing if a powerful enemy lies waiting on the horizon. Not a hater rating for me, but still only 60 self-sealing stem bolts. And I appreciate you telling some of your own story there. And I think the one good thing about this episode is it did, at least for me, and as last episode I talked about a lot, I definitely resonated with a lot of what Worf was going through too. And I think, in my experience in my life, I think I went on that whole journey where I was also super afraid to let myself go, to the point of being pretty Worf-like, being restrictive, then sort of like not knowing what to do. And I feel like a happy medium, right? And to have some freedom, but also put some guardrails. And I think that it's been a useful thing to do. Mysterious Anne says, when I was forcing myself to find appreciations during the watch-along, it's a great way to appreciate an episode you don't like, the watch-along at patreon.com/K&M. She says, I realized there were actually a lot of moments and performances that I enjoy. Quark and Lita are great throughout. I love the further canonization of Dax's queerness. The ROM reveal is fun, and I liked Vanessa Williams' performance and her character, which made Risa and a lot of people on Risa more real than on Next Generation. I also liked the positive, non-judgmental way they portrayed Dax and Worf's sexual relationship. I agree that it seems like they're both having a good and consensual fun, and it's a delight to see that kind of portrayal on a 90s show. I agree. She continues, I do think the emotional abuse red flags are up and waving. Worf is jealous of everyone who wants to spend time with her and doesn't like it when she does things or shares things with her friends. He doesn't listen to or believe her, and he slut-shames her. As a writer, if you're going to wave those flags, fine. But now you've made a choice for this character that you're going to have to deal with. As you guys noted, they really didn't do that here. And the ways that they kind of did were focused on excusing Worf and moving on rather than having the characters do real work. I appreciate you saying that, because that was the sort of other voice that I was trying to articulate. You articulated it much better than I did.
I think that's the sort of to put a finer point on it, I guess, is, just because not everyone can hear the dog whistle doesn't mean that isn't getting fired off. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they're definitely, even though we didn't think that it rose to the level of abuse, quote unquote, I think that doesn't mean that it's not a salient point that might affect some folks and it's not worth bringing up.
Well, and I think Anne's point about raising some red flags, absolutely.
100%.
I think, and I also think, this is why it is so important to have female voices on the writing staff and we appreciate very much, because look, there's a lot of dudes here doing the show, a lot of dudes watching the show, and having a female perspective, or at least a non-dude perspective on this, I think is an incredibly valuable thing to add to the conversation. So thank you very much.
Actually, bringing up a point, if you happen to be a lurker, you're a YouTube viewer, or you're listening to the podcast and you happen to be of non-dude identification, we welcome you to comment and to let your thoughts be known, because we definitely would love to balance the scales a little bit with our discourse.
Yeah, I mean, we very much subscribe to the infinite diversity and infinite combinations, and we would love more voices than just, this dude. But Anne finishes with, thank you for the places you took your conversation about this episode. I really appreciate your thoughtfulness, candor, and care with difficult topics and the perspectives you bring. It really does take a ton of work to address the control rigidity issues that can come up from trauma, and it would have been beautiful to explore that more with Worf. It does make sense to have that be a part of his character. Your conversation and ridiculously fun watch-along brought this episode up from the stem bolt basement to a 50 for me. Wonderful comments this week. Thank you all
thank you so
for
much.
Sharing those.
To think, Keith, that we could affect the stem bolts of a Star Trek property just really is just the humble nature.
Like I eat out. I eat lunch. No, that's not what I meant. You know what I mean. I take a lot of credit for my one tiny effect on Star Trek in the time it was being produced. But I'm really excited to, even post-show, 30 years afterwards, we're raising stem bolts here and there. Let's talk about the episode, shall we? We're only a half hour in. This episode
Keith's going to have a beard by the time we're done.
I'm going to have a beard and you're going to be Santa Claus.
My hair's white again.
November 18th, 1996, the top song, and I can't wait to hear it, continued to be No Diggity, Blackstreet featuring Dr. Dre.
No diggity, Keith's gotta eat it out.
I'm just saying, I'm all alone here in my basement. The top movie was Space Jam.
Okay, now we're talking.
I knew that would get you excited.
Love Space Jam.
I've never seen it. I've never seen that or the other one.
Any property with the Looney Tunes in there, I'm a fan of. The Looney Tunes are seminal favorites.
I love the Looney Tunes. I want them to do like a hockey jam, and then I'll be in.
Yeah, because that there's a Venn diagram there. People like hockey.
Hey, people like hockey.
Hey Keith, to echo your points of really the only social media posts I ever see you do, a hockey game with the Looney Tunes running all over it would still be less distracting than an actual televised hockey game.
Oh my god, terrible! I get so mad. Anyway, Mike, what was on TV before they layered 10 layers of graphics all over everything for no
Keith,
reason?
Would you believe ABC was still trying to make Dangerous Minds go?
Yep. The Annie Potts vehicle.
Yeah. Followed by NFL Monday Night Football, where your Dallas Cowboys beat the then Green Bay Packers 21-6. Good to know that the Dallas Cowboys are going to just really be bad this year. I love that news. Other stuff was on TV. CBS had a full slate of shows. Started with a show we will not mention, followed by Inc., Murphy Brown, Sybil and Chicago Hope, Melrose Place, and When Animals Attack 2. We're on Fox. Jeff Foxworthy is starting his dominance over on NBC, followed by a show never heard of called Mr. Rhodes. And on the UPN, we had Malcolm and Eddie, Good Behavior, and Sparks, 3 shows I've never heard about. And of course, Keith, on the WB, we had a back-to-back Jack episode night of Seventh Heaven.
Wow. There you go. Mm-hmm. But in all of that, we didn't know what Voyager was doing. What was Star Trek Voyager doing? Well, we were doing the episode Warlord, in which Kess is taken over by a bad guy. Another possession episode. That will be an episode we review someday. What was going on in the hard-hitting news? Well, folks, we have a very exclusive interview. A very exclusive interview with a giant celebrity who might also be aging and thickening just a bit. It's our good friend.
So close. I'm so close. We're almost there.
Don't take that out of context either.
What is happening?
Seeing is believing. An interview with Elvis, alive and well at 61.
That kind of looks like if old Elvis and William Shakespeare had a baby.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's what I love about this is the giant copyright at the bottom of that. Like we have to fill the space with something.
I know what that is.
we're not going to answer it.
Okay.
Okay.
Also, look at the chyron at the top. For years, Americans thought it was a joke. It wasn't. What are they talking about?
What was the joke?
Yeah, right. That wasn't not our finest Weekly World News. Oh my goodness, Keith
God.
is busy.
Golly. But I know it's spam because all the phones are lighting up at the same time. So I know it's spam. We might have to take the call live on the air and see what happens.
Keith, are you gonna vote for Robert Kennedy? I bet you that's what it's asking.
That'd be a hard no.
Okay.
It'd be the hardest of no's. Okay. All right. So this episode. All right. Finally, here we are. This episode, Things Past, was directed by Geordie himself, LeVar Burton, and was written by Michael Taylor, who last wrote on The Visitor, the legendary The Visitor. But this is Michael's last episode of Deep Space Nine before moving on to be a bigwig over at Voyager.
Good for him.
And this episode has some trivial trivia.
Good.
Yeah, that's a transition, folks.
With a giant brain worm. Woo!
Wow, really going for the RFK.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, there it is. Okay. All right, so here we go. Captain Lavara, a Romulan smuggler on the show, was named after LeVar Burton. Of course, Lavara, who directed this episode. This is not Kurtwood Smith's first experience in the Star Trek franchise, Butthead. Remember that 70s show?
Yeah.
He was the Federation president in Star Trek VI and the Undiscovered Country. I'm excited to get to that with the patrons in like 6 years.
Yeah, we have like 12 movies to go.
Well, we have to do First Contact like T-minus stat.
Okay.
Because we have one more episode of Deep Space Nine before it happens in canon.
All right.
So sometime in the next 2 weeks, we have to make.
We have to do it during a day. That's the problem. I have Monday, Tuesday evenings though, so we could probably.
We could do it Monday or Tuesday evening. Yeah, the Bruins have been eliminated. My evenings are free.
Okay.
Anyway, Kurtwood would go on also to play Anorax in the 2 episodes of Voyager: Year of Hell, Part 1 and 2, which might be some of the finest Voyagering that ever happens. Fantastic 2-part episode. Okay. Really excited to get to that in 7 years. The impetus to create a dark past for Odo came from the writer's desire to sully his character to a degree. As Ronald D. Moore explains, one of the things that always drove the writing staff nuts was the idea that Odo had been a policeman during the Cardassian occupation, but had never gotten his hands dirty. That he'd been above it all and that everybody trusted him. We never bought that. Mm-hmm. It seemed to me that if I were a Bajoran, I wouldn't trust the cop who's still on duty from the occupation. Somewhere along the line, something bad went down on Odo's watch, and Things Past was the show to say it. Interestingly, parts of what Moore had addressed there had been covered before. In the first season episode, A Man Alone, the character of Zara asks why the man appointed security chief of the station by the Cardassians is still security chief under the Bajorans. Super interesting. Kurtwood Smith said he thought that he was cast as Anorax on Voyager due to his performance as Thrax. I guess the producers liked what I did on Deep Space Nine because Thrax was actually the imagination of another character. He wasn't quite as interesting to play as Anorax. He didn't have nearly as much to do, but sometimes that job that doesn't seem that interesting leads to something much cooler. And this was before that 70s show. So before he went big.
Is he going to be on that 90s show as well?
I have no idea. I bet he would do like a cameo. But my father was obsessed with that 70s show, but I've only seen like 2 episodes. But you want to know who has seen more than 2 episodes of us?
Yeah.
Mikey, you can't be searching because it's your time to shine.
Keith, we are continually humbled by the support of our patrons. It started with a 1 slide and big font, and now it's 1 slide and medium font. Working on small font. We are joined, as always, by Bryant, Kimberl, Beersock, Jason Moe, Peter Bank, Frank Rinch, Quarks Bar, Maranith, Merritt Neath, Joshua Cronin, Ryan Chesley, Andrew Hayes, and the Mysterious Household, Worf's Big Ol' Boot Shifts, Charles Babbage, Harry Pothead, Allen, Anton Thies, Carl Fisher, Sierra Productions, Nicolay, Delusions at Noon, YouTube viewer James Hubbard, and Hibernation Pod. Also, sending us stuff in the mail and just being honorary supporters is also JD Makes, Colin Dagan, Chris Mitchell, and CRM, Pat, Joshua Cronin, JD, Lutz Kremer, and Wyatt Eldridge. They get to see me watch every episode of Deep Space Nine, AMAs, which Keith and I are filming this month, so if you have questions, get them on in, movie watch-alongs, other fun stuff, and just an incredible discourse of interesting and intelligent people talking about science fiction and moral thematic issues week to week. You can join the team, patreon.com/K and M. Spell out that and.
Yes, indeed. All right, Mike, it's time. What were those 3 words?
Butt plug?
That,
The SEO is really going well for us.
oh my god. So I was curious, just randomly, because I was bored for a second. And I was like, I wonder how many words we speak on a regular episode. So I went back to our last episode, and it turns out we spoke 18,000 words, which is like about a quarter of a novel.
What, did you ask ChatGPT that, or how did you do it?
No, I just took the transcript and put it into Word, got the word count.
Okay.
But to my surprise, the last thing said on that episode was your butt plug joke, which you tagged at the end of the episode. So, folks, Mike does this all the time without me knowing it.
Mm-hmm.
He tags after the end of the episod. Stick around.
Yeah. I like that. Like the 3 people who stick around, I want them to get a nice little juicy piece.
But they have... Mike. Oh.
Don't ever let me say juicy again. In any context.
Please don't ever. But, Mike, pretend we're at a Little League soccer game. Behave. Okay.
Keith, I'll have you know that our boy, what's his name? Kirkwood Smith?
Mm-hmm.
He is one of the lead characters on Netflix's reboot, That 90s Show.
Okay. Well, I guess he'd be like the grandfather this generation.
Mm-hmm. And to my knowledge, I didn't know it, but it's already been released.
Oh. Well, how about that? Man,
not only that, but last year, 2023.
Man, we are right here with our fingers on the pulse.
Oh, how did it do? I guess okay.
Wow. Yeah, these are the guys who should be doing a weekly show called K&M Geekly.
Yeah.
Where we review things. Yeah. All right. So things passed. Let's talk about this episode because I think it's a very interesting episode to talk about.
Do you?
I do, actually.
Okay.
Just because you were too tired to really take it in, so I'm gonna paint a word picture, and then you're gonna go back and watch it again, and you're gonna appreciate it.
Okay.
So in our teaser, Garak, now out of prison apparently, because remember, he tried to start World War III.
No. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That was a short stint.
Well, he's only 6 months apparently. So.
Was it mind prison or was it real prison?
I think it was real prison, prison. But Federation real prison seems pretty soft. I mean, it'd be better than like our first apartment in New York. I guarantee that.
Okay, that's tough. I shared a bathroom with 12 people.
Yeah, I shared a bathroom with you. So.
No, well, that was your. Yeah, I had many apartments before that.
Yeah, well, fair enough. Okay, so.
That was an upgrade.
Yeah. Garak, Dax, Sisko, and Odo are returning from Bajor after having.
Wasn't that gross? We had a separate poop bathroom, which I think is an upgrade from most people.
Without a doubt, except for we had that one weird roommate.
He would not abide.
Well, it's not so much that he had a macrobiotic diet and was an optional flusher.
Mm-hmm.
He tried to friend me on Facebook, and I'm
Did
like,
he really?
Nope.
Does he still have really long hair?
Yeah, I don't know. I did not. The request was not approved because if you, all right, folks, if you want to be friends with me on Facebook, flush.
Mm-hmm.
There it is. Can we please?
Or be a Japanese sex bot.
What? Oh, yeah, sure. I have a lot of those. All right, so they're returning from Bajor after having attended a conference about the occupation. Garak is surprised at the icy reception he got, despite defending the military occupation of Bajor on Bajor. Though, to be fair, his name tag saying Garak, former Cardassian oppressor, was a little on the nose. Odo, on the other hand, was quite popular. Dax says he should be proud of what he did during the occupation, and Odo disagrees. He says, I tried to bring order to a chaotic situation, that's all. But everyone tells him he did a good job. What was it the moderator said? You may have worked for the Cardassians, but your only master was justice. That, folks, is a thematic teaser. Later, on the station, they discover the runabout flying on autopilot with everyone there unconscious. Then, Sisko, Odo, et al. Wake up on the floor of the promenade, but back when it was Terek Nor during the occupation. So we don't know what's going on here. Mike, what did you think was going on?
I was thinking, one, that it was like the most... I think of all teasers, the most happened in this teaser, right? We saw them talking. We heard about the backstory of Bajor. We see them fall asleep. We then see them wake up. And I was like, that's the theme song to Quantum Leap, friends, because this is a Quantum Leap episode.
It is definitely, this is precisely a Quantum Leap episode.
Except there was nothing to set right, turns out.
Well, they had to set, but it was Odo's coming clean about what he did. That's what had to be set right. Mm-hmm. So in Act 1, everyone is wearing Bajoran civilian clothes, and they are woken up by a Bajoran who thinks they were all addicts who had passed out. They get up and try to figure out where they are. On Deep Space Nine, Bashir says all their brains are working, but they're unconscious. So Worf says they hit a plasma storm, but they have no idea what happened. So technobabble, they're all having this shared dream, essentially. On Terek Nor, they realize that they're on the past, but it's weird. They're wearing Bajoran clothes, and nobody's reacting to them as who they are, Cardassians, humans, Trills, and changelings, and they assume that they're being seen as Bajorans. It's mysterious. And Odo looks particularly freaked out, and he wants off of the station. And Odo says, Captain, the authorities on Terek Nor will not be looking for reasons to help us. They'll be looking for reasons to interrogate us. And believe me, you do not want to be interrogated by the Cardassians. Then they spot Gul Dukat on the second level. And we see a Cardassian looking down at Odo with a staring expression. You know what I mean? Then we see Odo hallucinate a dead Bajoran, but he is the only one who sees it. So Odo's cracking up immediately here. Garak points out that the Cardassian looking at Odo was his predecessor, Thrax. Dax realizes this means that they are at least 9 years in the past. Then a Cardassian soldier comes up and grabs Dax. Garak tries to bribe him, but the soldier takes Dax and says, she's been selected, and punches Garak. And back in the present, we find that Garak's nose has started to bleed. So there's
some crossover.
Yeah. And we immediately in Act 2, Bashir and Worf confirm that what happens in his head happens in real life.
That's always, though. It's never, but the except, you know what I mean? Like, it's always that's tropey.
It's the same thing as the holodeck, the safeties in the holodeck are off, because otherwise it'd be no stakes.
What's the movie? I think somebody mentioned it in the chat today, but it's when it happens, if you die in your dream. Oh, Nightmare on Elm Street. If you die in your dream, you die in real life. Yeah.
That's true. We're doing Nightmare on Elm Street rules here. Makes sense. So our heroes try to figure out who they are in this timeline. And we find out that Garak stole a Cardassian pad when he was beat up. He is, of course, a pickpocket as well as a spy. Though he claims he only dabbles. Garak explains who everyone is. they're Bajorans, and Odo immediately recognizes the names, and he looks stricken. Then, Quark, in this timeline, the Terek Nor timeline, comes up and announces that they're going to work for him today. And he's kind of a dick, yet also giving them a chance to make money in a world where it's difficult. Knowing that refusing work will look very suspicious, they agree and follow. Quark is super condescending, and Odo wonders what it would do to the timeline to kill him. And this whole episode is about dirtying up our characters a little bit. And I think I think it's good. I think it actually helps us. But it's interesting what they do to Quark here too. And because it makes you wonder, is Quark being such a dick to them? Is that Quark actually doing that? Or is it
colored
play acting for the Cardassians, knowing that he's helping out the Bajorans by giving them some work and doesn't want to seem too buddy-buddy with the Bajorans and make the Cardassians suspicious? Or is he kind of shitty like this?
That's a really interesting point. I played it as two ways, right? One, in my head, once I've come around, I just got the quote-unquote twist at the end, but though this all happened, I think clearly this memory and the specifics of the memories is colored by Odo's grief, Odo's guilt, Odo's stuff, right? Whatever his stuff is. So, this is it's an unreliable narrator, right? But there's nothing that indicates this is exactly how it went down. B, Quark, at the end of the day, especially some years past, like we're seeing him at maybe pre some of his arcs he's had. And for someone who's so profit motivated, this was a great scenario for him, you know what I mean? Where he was getting cheap labor. He was getting to be kind of a little bit of a boss and throw his weight around a little bit.
And exploiting people is part of the Ferengi ethics.
So, and I think he's getting off a little bit on the fact that he's getting this cheap labor and he can, I think it all tracks. Yes, does it muddy it up a little bit, but you got to remember, Quark isn't the happy-go-lucky, good time guy all the time anyway. He's had to overcome some stuff to get to where he is currently. So,
yeah, I think that the possibility, are we showing progression from Quark here? I think we definitely have seen Quark progress quite a bit over the time. But your point about Odo's experience of this coloring the performances, I think that makes a lot of sense. But in that context, two things are a little weird, right? If that were the case, and this is all about his guilt and his shame for his behavior, I would imagine that he would imagine a world in which he is the only person being really crappy. And that in that world where he's feeling so guilty, I would write Quark as being super good, not super crappy, which leads me to believe that this is actually kind of what happened. And in addition, the Dukat of it all, I'm not sure what Odo's point of view on all of that would be, or what.
Well, that's sort of the wormhole in my reading of it. There are scenes where you would expect, the scenes with Dukat and Dax, that Odo would be present somewhere because it would be his memory of such. But we don't see him there, and so that's hard to. It's hard to say that that's manifested in his brain only, and that's not being experienced in the link with Dax. There, actually, that's a wormhole I'd love to discuss a bit at the end.
And if it is, because we know it's sort of linked, is that actually Dax's imagination?
Yeah.
Of what that would be? Is that because if it were an orb experience, I would think, okay, all of this was like a literal expression of what happened here. And I think we are to believe that this is accurate.
Yeah, but the thing that they never give us at the end of the episode, or maybe I missed it, to be honest, I've only watched it once, is when they come back after all of this at the end, we only hear from Odo and Kira and Bashir. Right. We don't get any confirmation that the rest of them actually experienced this or have any recollection of it. You know what I mean?
Oh.
You get the impression they have agency within it, but then at the end, when they're all kind of conspiratorial towards him, and then they disappear, and there exists, I think, a reading where they are not privy to all this happening.
Oh, interesting. I hadn't thought of. I took it as pro se that it was.
I did too, until they have that scene where like Sisko's really hard on him and he's like, well, this all has to do with you and blah blah blah. It's after they kind of magic back into the cell.
But I think they had good reason to be suspicious like that.
Yeah, it just felt a little pointed to me that made me kind of question it.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it is really interesting then how much of this is all in Odo's head, but they do say that
we have experience prior to this, right? If we are to think, sorry to jump ahead, but if we are thinking this is all caused by the Great Link or something adjacent to the Great Link, do we have another experience where a non-changeling is understanding or reading what's happening within the link?
No.
Okay, so this would be unique.
This would be unique, and the technobabble is like they went through the storm of the whatever and the who
the goo in his brain
and the who cares. Yeah. Anyway,
I'm making it more interesting than it is, to be honest with you.
Well, I think, and again, cutting to the end here, we'll go quick through the rest of it. I think what is interesting about this episode is not the how, and it's not the mystery of the thing, and it's not the whatever. It's entirely about Odo's emotional journey, Odo's guilt in what happened. And it is a character piece about guilt and shame and loss. And all the specifics of it are kind of pointless.
Yeah. Okay,
I mean, they have to be there, but they're just sort of like rote building blocks to get to Odo's emotional reaction at the end. So, meanwhile, Dax arrives in Ducat's office. She gives the name Lita, and she stays in character as a frightened Bajoran woman. Lita obviously just being a Bajoran name that she came up with off the top of her head after her best friend Lita. Ducat offers her Kanar and says, "Why, you're trembling. Despite what you may have heard, I'm a fair man, Lita. Rest assured, you have nothing to fear from me. I didn't bring you here to be abused." And she says, "Well, then why am I here? It may surprise you to hear this, but my position is a lonely one. I'm isolated from the people who live under my protection. I require someone to talk with. In short, a friend." Just being as creepy as always. Later, it's closing time in Quarks. Sisko, Garak, and Odo are exhausted. And I also think we dirty up Garak a little bit here, too. And Garak says, "I had no idea we were such messy conquerors. I remember the occupation as being a little bit more tidy than this." Sisko says, "Everyone's tidy when someone else is doing the cleaning." And Garak says the Bajorans were more suited to this sort of work than we were. Servile work is in their nature. And I wrote down what I just been saying. Everyone is kind of meaner and more racist in this episode. It's dark. It's very like that is not a line we would get from somebody who are on the side of. But again, this is where Deep Space Nine just travels in darker corners than most of the other shows, especially with our heroes. Then Odo has another hallucination of the dead Bajorans. Sisko, who waited 12 hours to ask this question for some reason, asks why Odo recognized their names, the Bajorans that they look like. And Odo says, "I recognize the other two names from the security files kept during the occupation." The security files kept during the occupation. Does not admit his part in this yet. Timur, Ishan, and Jalur were names of the three Bajorans who were accused of attempting to assassinate Gul Dukat on the promenade. Half the resistance tried to kill Dukat, but Odo says these three were innocent. However, no one knew that at the time. and Dukat wanted to make an example of them, so they lied, so they were led out to the promenade and were publicly executed. And they realize that they are these three people, and they're in trouble. But it is interesting that Odo lies, or he doesn't directly lie, but he obfuscates. He talks about it as a thing that happened to other people and not to him. So again, it's interesting from Odo, who wouldn't normally do that. So in Act 3, in Quark's, Thrax comes up and interrogates Quark about some shady dealings, much like Odo does all the time. Odo, Sisko, and Garak watch this interaction and note the similarities in the dynamic. But Garak then realizes, hey, this timeline is off. This is 7 years ago, and Thrax wasn't here yet. This should be Odo. And Odo says, we just need to get out of here. They try contacting the Bajoran resistance to try to get out, and they do a secret signal of turning a Horgon upside down and waiting to be contacted. Then they say Dukat wandering through the Bajoran sector with Dax in tow. Then Odo hallucinates blood on his hand, and he keeps, like everything else, keeps all of these hallucinations quiet. And here is where there was a cutscene that goes as follows. As Dukat walks through the Bajoran sector with Dax, Dukat is playing the benevolent ruler, walking among his subjects, unconcerned that there's no affection in their eyes. And Dukat says, on the contrary, I find these visits stimulating. Each time I come, I find another example of Bajorans making progress. Dax says progress. For example, not that long ago, you'd find them burning Malaba drums on this level just to keep warm. 6 months ago, I extended the environmental controls into the Bajoran sector. And look, no fires, no poor unfortunates shivering under blankets. And stage directions, Dukat beams with pride. But Dax looks around at the very unhappy, destitute crowd and sees little to be proud of. Just a little malnutrition and lack of medical care. I didn't say anything. And then Dukat heads over to the kiosk of goods. The Bajorans part in front of him. And, once again, it's Dukat's delusional, megalomaniacal need to be worshipped here. And finding ways to find heroic deeds in his cruelty, in his casual cruelty. It's a good scene. I see why they cut it, because it's repeated beats, but I thought it was good color.
That's cool.
So back in our episode, the guy from the Resistance comes up and asks what they want. They start explaining, and then there's an explosion, and Dukat and Dax have been mildly blown up. Sisko immediately runs to check on her as Odo tries to stop him, knowing that this is the past repeating itself. And the three of them are, of course, immediately arrested. In Act 4, Odo and pals find themselves in a familiar location, but an unfamiliar position, being locked in a holding cell. Garak announces that Thrax announces that they have been accused of trying to assassinate Dukat. Thrax comes in and announces everyone's sentence before getting to our heroes. And he accuses them of the crime and lays out the evidence. But Odo argues with him, saying they were innocent explanations to all the elements of the crime. Odo demands that they interrogate the Cardassians, and Thrax says something very interesting, putting it in Odo context later. I don't interrogate members of the Cardassian military. Which means Odo didn't interrogate members of the Cardassian military. That's not good for a guy saying he's going to look for justice no matter what. Odo begs him to conduct a real investigation. He's very emotional, out of character emotional. Meanwhile, Dukat and Dax discuss the assassination attempt. This is the 5th time he's tried to get him killed. And Dukat says, I've wanted to increase rations in the Bajoran sector for some time, but the resistance makes it almost impossible to show any kind of kindness to your people. there are some parallels happening in real life right now. I will not go into them because, talk about rocky shoals, but Dax says, you really want to help my people, don't you? Dukat says, of course. The Bajorans are, well, they're like my children, I suppose. And like any father, I want only what's best for them. And Dax says, you still feel like that now, after some of your children tried to kill you? And Dukat says, bad manners are the fault of the parent, not the child. My weakness is that I'm too generous, too forgiving. My heart is too big. At this point, Dax knocks him out, thankfully. And in the cell, Sisko asks Odo about Thrax. He seems different, and he wonders why Thrax is here now when Odo is supposed to be here. And this is when Dax burns a hole through the side of the cell, a la Star Trek V.
Also,
do you remember that, right?
No, I was thinking Episode 1, Phantom Menace of Star Wars. Qui-Gon Jinn comes and gets them out with the lightsaber. But
the lightsaber, yeah. It looks like Dax had a lightsaber. That's some good practical fire there. So they go to make their escape, but then get caught in the hall. There's a fight. Garak shoots a guy that's fighting Odo. Then Sisko fights Thrax, who then goos into an air vent. He's a changeling. They keep moving.
Do they follow up on that ever?
What do you mean?
The changeling thing? Felt like that
it's
was
Odo.
Have...
Don't you remember the entire twist of the entire episode?
He gooed out. No, I guess I missed the goo part. I mean, I know the twist, that it's him.
Well, right, but he is Thrax.
Oh, right. Okay, that makes sense then.
So Odo gooed out.
Mm-hmm.
So they keep moving towards the airlock, but then instantly or magically find themselves back in the cell. And a guard announces they have 2 hours before the execution. And you were confused by that moment there, and I was too. I think it was a little unclear what had happened there.
Mm-hmm.
Because they were sort of instantly winked back to the cell, but we didn't have any indication. Like, there should have been some sort of a visual flash or an auditory clue.
Or even like had that kind of a mix-up or reset, how whatever have you happened once before, or a couple of times to have raised suspicion, and that could have been part of the mystery overall, It
was just visually unclear.
Yeah.
And I get it was intentionally disorienting, and we do sort of explain it so like you get it retroactively a little bit, but I think it was more confusing than they wanted it to be.
Generally speaking, if both of us catch it and feel that way, it's a little muddy, I think.
It's a little muddy. I think LeVar should have added something to let us know they had been winked out. Because it's literally just a camera pan, and then we're somewhere else.
Yeah, it looked like a bad pan, like a bad cut, like
a bad edit. Yeah. I think that's right. That's a better way to put it. Like, it looked unintentional when it was intentional.
Mm-hmm.
So in Act 5, they all keep trying to figure out what's going on and start interrogating Odo himself.
This is weird, but I'll bring it up. One of the things I not struggled with, which I found to be a fun challenge in directing Forever Plaid, is so the kind of general conceit is it's this group that is coming back to Earth after having been killed to perform this show that they never got to perform, right? That's the conceit. And because they're a little rusty, they've been in purgatory, let's say, for a bunch of years.
Those plaid kids are in hell.
Yeah, at the beginning of the show, sometimes they'd make a wrong move in the choreography. And so how do you stage something such that there's enough of a wink and a nod that the audience knows that you're not really messing up, but also it's reading as though the character's messing up, and both of those things have to be true at the same time? And that's not always easy to do. And so, that goes for the film medium as well. Because you can't, there's a subtle art to cuts, or if you fade out on a something in an upper third, you might want to bring the next scene to start in the upper third so that it's all visually cohesive. And so when you catch a blip like that, like the reason it was is in my recollection is that they were traveling to camera left, and then the cut happened, and all of a sudden they were in camera right. And so it it just seemed visually disorienting. We get why
Yeah.
they do it, but at the time, it just seemed like a bad choice.
No, and I think your point about how do you make an intentional mistake, and because like you're right, it has to have an affectation that says this is intentional, even though it's a mistake, because otherwise you make your audience nervous.
Yeah.
And you take them out instead of telling a story. You take them out of the story because then you're like, oh God, what's happening? They
you
blew
feel
their
uneasy.
whatever.
Yeah.
It makes people uneasy, and that's you don't ever like you want to make your audience feel a lot of different things, but uneasy and concerned for the actor is never the one that
This
you
is
want.
one of those reasons why Keith and I often, and I know we bring it up ad nauseum, is that not only is it much more powerful, I think, to watch and to play fighting tears than just letting them go, right? I think just visually and artistically and as far as active acting, that's a better choice. But also, specifically in live performance, but it happens in other mediums as well. Once an actor breaks down and starts the crying activity, you then become uneasy about, can they sing? Are they going to be able to say their lines? Am I going to understand their lines? Am I going to see their snot? Am I going to, like, there's all these other sort of connected things we start to worry about it as an audience that you as an actor don't really want to bring to them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a whole thing.
Storytelling is really hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard. So, anyway, Sisko says, everything seems to lead back to you, Odo, and I want to know why. But he's saved when Thrax comes in and agrees to talk to Odo privately. And Odo lays out the evidence. And Thrax says, well, that proves nothing. Under Cardassian law, the accused must prove their innocence. Since the evidence in this case is sufficient to warrant a conviction, the investigation is over. Odo says, your job is to find the truth, not obtain convictions. You want the truth? All right. The truth is, none of you would be accused, none of you would be even here if the Bajorans weren't fighting the Cardassians. It's futile. The occupation has lasted for 50 years and it will probably last another 50, so why not accept it? If the Bajoran people accepted their place in history, none of this would have happened. It's all part of the same problem. When your people resort to terrorism and violence, they're fighting against order, against stability, against the rule of law, and it must stop. Whew! Does that resonate today? It's dark. It's really dark. Especially, again, in context, that's Odo saying that. Odo finally tells him what's going on, and Thrax says, I know. You know? Then what are you going to do about it? And Thrax says, what I'm supposed to. Nothing more, nothing less. The question is, what will you do, Odo? It is by now clear that Thrax is not Thrax. It was Odo. And Odo is then forced to watch as they prepare and execute the three of them. When Odo finally tries to fight to stop it, he returns to himself, and we watch the real scene play out. Odo confesses to what happened, that he was the one who got the three of them killed, and discovered 3 days later that they were innocent. The confession breaks the spell, and they all wake up. We find out that they were in a modified version of the Great Link, technobabble, telepathic hallucination, but somewhere in there, part of Odo is not fully human, which is interesting. And then we get to the heart of it. Kira enters and leaves, and Bashir leaves them alone. And Kira says, when I finished reading your report, I didn't know what to think. So I said to myself, that's okay, Nerys, you're just stunned. You need to let this sink in a little. It's been 2 days, Odo, and I still don't know what to think. And Odo says, I'm guilty. What more is there to say? Maybe nothing, maybe a lot. I believed in you. A lot of people did. You were special. The one man who stood apart from everyone else. The one man who stood for justice. Now what? And Odo says, now I'm just another imperfect solid. Okay, The prophets know I'm not perfect. And I guess the truth is that anyone who lived through the occupation had to get a little dirty. But I need to know that no other innocent people died on your watch, Odo. That this was the only time. And in the stage directions, it says, and this is perhaps the most difficult admission of all, Odo says, I'm not sure. I hope so. And the stage directions continue. Odo sits at his desk. Kira looks at him for a moment. Then she sits down too as they absorb the terrible truth of that statement. And of course, this is a sequel to Necessary Evil, which is the other episode where we went back in time, not literally, but we told the story back in Terek Nor when Odo was the investigator, but Kira was the one who killed somebody for the occupation. And the episode ends exactly the same way, with the two of them in that office, with the tables reversed, the characters reversed. And I think it's really fascinating to see both of them struggle with what they did and struggle with what the other person did, and how do you repair that? And so it really is a twin dovetail there for those two characters. So we have lots to talk about, but we do that in a very important segment, Mike.
And I won't hit the button, Keith. First, we have to make a pact. I'll do
What's
it
that?
as soon as you take that pen and you throw it behind you.
What this pen?
The one that sounds like a mouse squeaking. It's not the clicking; it's a squeak it's doing. I can't explain.
Is that bothering
that's
you?
gotta stop. Oh God, it's the worst.
But luckily, I have more. Got a whole jar of them. See, I could save you from that pen, or this pen, or this pen, or
just one that doesn't squeak. The click doesn't bother me. In fact, it's kind of satisfying. But the squeak.
The squeak. All right.
Okay, wormholes. No, that's
wormholes.
Better.
Yeah,
that's better. None pop out so much, but I will say that the techno babble of it all at the end does bother me. Usually, we're just like, okay, techno babble, but like it matters here because the whole episode, it's kind of like at the end, they're like, well, none of that mattered. But the central mystery of it does sort of matter to me. I was trying to figure it out, and I thought it would have more, there would be some sort of clues, like the best whodunits where you go back, Sixth Sense style, and you can watch it a second time and be like, oh, I can put it together. There's none of that here. It's all kind of lame stream. But, so that I put on the list. I understand we're dirtying up some of the characters. I don't quite understand. It's not a wormhole such that like the whole Lita Ducat or Dax Ducat thing. I'm trying to figure out what point that's making other than just Ducat gonna Ducat. Yeah, I guess that's all I have as far as wormholes go.
Well, I mean, I think the little bit of the mystery about this being him establishing a link with some changeling still within him, I think that is a mystery, and I think that is like supposed to be a mystery. I think the mysterious part is who's telling the story. Is it true?
Mm-hmm.
And I know it is emotionally true for Odo, and I think these events did happen, but did it happen this way word for word? Did we have agency to change anything? I don't know, because you think of the scene where the fight happens. Like, that fight never happened. They never escaped. They never had that thing. So, like, that was clearly invented. But was the rest of it word for word? I don't know.
Yeah, and also when Thrax is talking to him all of those times, and then at the end when he's talking to him, is it him talking to himself? But how is that playing? Is it his subconscious has agency in this dream? So how much else of it is... What I'm saying is that there's enough that didn't happen that, like you said, I don't know if we can believe that it's all verbatim. I just don't know.
Right. I mean, I think we can believe that this is how Odo remembers it.
Yeah, that's fair.
That this is Odo's, and memory is faulty. It's not a perfect record. It's certainly tinged with emotion here. Unclear. You know, why do I think we did the Dukat beats? I think it had a larger purpose too. In the same way that like dirtying up Odo and like facing the reality of the position that he was in, you know, and maybe Quark as well. I think it was the same thing with Dukat, because it's reminding us as an audience what a dirtbag Dukat is.
Mm-hmm.
Because Dukat's been on a bit of a redemption
arc
journey here, and he's been a little bit of the hero. He's helped us, and so it's, you know, whether he has changed, whether, you know, does this reveal that his nature has changed, or does this reveal the nature that is underneath Dukat? To be determined. But I think it was important to reinforce the casual cruelty of Dukat in this time period. All right, let's talk best moment.
Yeah, I have a weird one, man, and so Renee's performance in this episode, I think, is its shining redemption from the depths of meh, in my case.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, as far as that one bad cut we talked about, or let's not bad cut, because it isn't that one bit of muddied storytelling visually, I want to commend, actually, once again, much as like I did in Trials and Tribulations, the juxtaposition. I got it in finally, the episode.
There it is.
The juxtaposition
like
of
a quarter jar every time you say it.
Color saturation and grading between Deep Space Nine and Tarek Noor is subtle but awesome. And they do a great scene right at the end when you kind of see Odo sort of watching them across the promenade, and then it kind of cuts back and forth, and you sort of see our Odo versus Tarek Noor Odo, and like their character is slightly darkened and the shading is different and everything. It's just really visually cool.
Such an authoritarian costume.
Yeah. And I just thought that goes such a long way visually, and in the oppressive feeling and the differences and matched sort of what his emotional state is in that time period. So I wanted to commend it since it was pretty well done.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's obviously the final scene.
Mm-hmm.
Odo and Kira, you know, just dealing with this. And because this has such a specific resonance for Kira, more than it would any other character, because she's Bajoran, because she was on the other side of this, but also because of their relationship.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that you know, outside of Odo's romantic feelings towards her, they are clearly each other's best friends.
Mm-hmm.
And to have your best friend turn out to have this darkness, but not just that, to have this darkness in this very specific way that touches your darkness, and to have it overlap in that very specific way, so it's both more painful but also you're in a better position to understand than anybody else. I think like the depth of all of that is really fascinating, and I thought the performances in it were great. So final scene is definitely my best moment.
You get some stamps. Hell yeah, they are self-sealing. Here are some stamps for you.
So the word that comes to my head here is belabored. I get it. I mean, I'm hearing it all again, and I get it. It just felt like belabored. I felt that we could have done it better, or we could have done it shorter, to a point where I think that all of the scenes where we cut back to Worf and Bashir trying to figure it out and give us exposition to fill in the blanks are totally filler. They almost are, I feel, completely wasted almost entirely, except for the cool headpiece prop.
I think they lower the stakes.
Yeah, because it's like, you know, I think that save Renee's performance of the strife that he's going through, it would have been very middling. I think his performance sells it better than the script does, than any of the twists do, than any of the. It's thank God for Renee. And for me, Keith, and maybe a multiple viewings will change this. I have to say that last scene hit me the complete opposite way. It really turned me off.
Really?
It really turned me off because of the context you brought up with Kira having gone through this and had been a freedom fighter and understanding that there are things that we regret, things we did wrong, things we wish we could change in the heat of an occupation, in the heat of battle. You know, we've dealt with a lot of these concepts. I felt like you had to introduce her sooner. I know we had the pregnancy and the birth, and it was difficult, and you know how long she could be on set or whatever. But they don't bring her until the very end. They don't mention she's not part of the. You know, had it been in the beginning in the teaser, if it was her reiterating his cum laudes, you know, that maybe would have bookended it better. But her coming in and just sort of was like laying this all on him, and not giving any sort of deference to the gray area until he brings it up, not offering him any grace, really turned me off. I thought for sure.
Interesting.
I really felt like she was being a total, like, just unfair and like that's not the grace I would offer a friend, right? I just felt it. I felt very cold towards it. I don't know. Maybe I'm just in a mood.
That's interesting.
She doesn't offer him any grace, right? When she, of all people, should be the one who's like, I get it, and that sucks, but like, tell me this won't happen again. Instead of tell me you didn't do more. Like, you tell me you didn't fuck up more because I idolize you.
Honestly, considering her situation, I think the grace she shows by it is being in the room at all.
What's her situation? She is equally as guilty, maybe, and like.
No, she's not. That's the thing, and that's what's interesting about this is that she did some dark things for a good cause, right? Mm-hmm. He was just a flat-out authoritarian for no reason.
Okay, all right.
He had no good reason. Mm-hmm. There was no greater good. She was not murdering a bad guy for good reasons. Mm-hmm. He and wasn't like aspiring to create change. He was just a flat out authoritarian order. You know, like his like Thrax's speech at the end, like you're beat, stop fighting. You are wrong for fighting the occupation.
But he's not a human, and he was coming from an incredibly difficult and all kinds of circumstances that we have learned from the beginning. Like there is a whole journey of his place, finding his way where he was in Terek Nor that he has dealt with, and I think that, or he is dealing with. And I think
I agree. I agree.
And to just
but
say
I
because
don't...
I idolized you, and they never portrayed Odo as having any hubris whatsoever about how I'm the epitome of truth, justice, and the American way. You know. Now the fault lies on those who maybe looked to him as that ideal, right? Which he eventually gets to, I think, later in her speech. I just felt like the way it started felt very attacky, and it just turned me off instantly.
I think you're thinking of them as. You know, obviously we're dovetailing these two characters, and we're dealing with the things that they did during the occupation that they regret, that how like brutal that world was and bad things happen and everybody gets dirty. But I think that's assuming that they're coming in roughly on par, that their moral failings here were roughly equal. Mm-hmm. And I don't think they are. I think what Kira did was different than what Odo did because it was for a greater purpose. It was fighting an injustice, maybe fighting an injustice in a dirty or severe way that maybe is justifiable, maybe it's not.
Well,
but Odo was the
this.
injustice.
Let me broaden this. Okay, and I'm not trying to equate them, but you know, to like indirectly parallel, right? If in some of Kira's missions, I'm sure innocent civilians of said occupation and whatnot were killed, sure. Right? Mm-hmm. Does that, because you believe it was just in that mission, does that make that okay? Does that...
No. I'm not saying that one is okay and one is not. I'm saying that neither are okay, but mm-hmm. one of them is much worse.
Okay.
That right. even on the side of wrong, there's this wrong and then there's that wrong.
So then let me utilize this conversation, which I'm not trying to have it's not really an argument because I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm
having fun.
I'm just saying that the feeling I got from that exchange didn't feel like it was a thesis of this episode.
Yeah.
And I feel like the conversation we just had in this past 3 minutes was more interesting to me than the conversation that the episode is attempting to have. If that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I think that makes sense.
It just felt like I think LeVar really tried harder than the script allowed. So I'm just feeling real meh on it, but I am really interested in everybody's thoughts.
Yeah.
Yes, on the episode proper, but mostly more in that last scene. Like, where do you come down on, like, could we have written Kira's speech in a different? I'm just curious as to like where you fell on it. It really turned me off for some reason. Maybe because I don't want to wrestle with Odo's place as not being a total good guy, you know?
Well, and that is, I think that's one of the most challenging things about the episode.
I also want to know how he got to that position, right? I know we've talked about it before, but like I really would love that whole backstory about where Odo started from, how he ended up where he was exactly.
Well, we sort of see it in
that first one, right?
In Necessary Evil, do we not?
But I mean, between like scientist guy, like his
yes, how did he get onto the station?
Yeah. Because that would kind of color my whole feelings as to where his mind plays in it. Anyway, so yeah, at the end of the day, I feel pretty hard meh about it. So I can't give you more than a 69.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, and your point about we love these characters so much.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard to watch them fail.
Mm-hmm.
And like morally fail. So we're like disappointed in them. And it hurts a little bit. It's like finding out your parents have flaws and you're like, "Oh, God."
Yeah, that was the other point I was going to raise about, like when you realize in therapy or just in life that your parents were normal people who messed up and that they weren't the be all end all, because when you're a teenager and you're judging your parents, you're judging them based on a measuring stick that is not a life experience you don't have, right? So your ideals are much harder. There's less grace to give at that point. And here, I just think what I do love in that last exchange most is when Odo says, "I can't promise that. I hope so, but and I'm less circumspect to go back and look at any of it under a microscope again, especially under truth serum, because I don't want to know."
And I think that shows a great deal of integrity.
Mm-hmm. But but like, at least I want to do better now,
Like, yeah, I mean, obviously, and I obviously regret this, and like, but he stops lying because he kind of lies throughout this episode, and he's like, "I know what you want to hear is that never happened again. All I can give you is I hope it didn't happen again, but I don't really know." Yeah, so look, the criticism of this episode I think is fair and clear from the structure and writing standpoint of the episode, right? The mystery of the three Bajorans or whatever, who cares? Right? The particulars of that, it's not that interesting. We don't really have a great deal to say more about Tarek Noor that we didn't already know, right? And so it's kind of boring a little bit until we get to the reveal.
Anticlimactic, I would say, yeah.
Well, I think it's the opposite of that. It's anti-run up to.
Yeah,
the climax is actually really exciting. Everything the run up to it is boring.
That's fair.
And so, I think them revealing that they're just asleep and like, okay, so you could get punched in the nose, like there are stakes, sort of. I think that all really lowered the stakes for me. I think we never should have. We should never have known what was going on until we wake up. That would have made it much more interesting and much scarier than it was, because we know, like, oh, they're just lying in Bashir's thing. They'll figure it out, right? So we just didn't really learn much other than meeting authoritarian Odo, right? Who's kind of scary.
Yeah.
And like the scariest parts are what Thrax says. You want the truth? All right, the truth is none of you would have been accused. None of you would be here if the Bajorans weren't fighting the Cardassians. It's futile. The occupation lasted for 50 years and will probably last another 50, so why not accept it? The Bajoran people accepted. If the Bajoran people accepted their place in history, none of this would have happened. Blaming the victim for fighting back against the oppression. Right? That's the scariest part of this whole episode, is at some point in his existence, Odo believed that. He was a true authoritarian. And that also reminds us very much of the founders themselves.
Yeah.
Right? The way the founders want to control and resent resistance to that and are brutal in their punishment for people who resist their brutality is exactly how the founders operate, and that is the villain. And so you wonder, nature nurture Odo here. Did Odo come out and is that a trait of the species?
Right.
Is it an experience of Odo's sort of tough upbringing, right? And his not really having parents. His so-called father was a dick. He was not treated well, all of this. And it also makes me wonder, how old is Odo? And not in the sense of like, when did he be first by Magoo, but between consciousness and now, how many years of life experience does Odo have? Is Odo kind of like an old-looking teenager here? And might be sort of drawn to simplistic authoritarian ideas? I don't know. I think that changes his level of complicity. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, I think it shows Odo's growth, right?
Yeah.
But it also showed, like, Odo, when he first started here, was in a very dark place, and he was not a good guy. And it's not so much that he screwed up this case, right? That he was it wasn't that he was lazy. I think that's the other big piece of this. Odo didn't fail this because he was rushing, because he was kind of lazy, or he was distracted, or like he failed this because he believed in what the Cardassians were doing. He believed in their system of justice. He believed in what they were saying about it's the Bajorans' fault, right? He believed in the innocent need to prove their innocence, not the accusers need to prove them guilty. Like, he bought in
Right.
all of these things. And that's the really scary part. But, again, did I buy into all sorts of shit when I was a teenager that I wish I hadn't bought into? Sure, we all do. And I think that's where the grace comes in, to allow him to grow and allow him to change. But I think from Kira's point of view, they are not on equal footing morally from what they did during the occupation. And I don't think they are. Anyway, so in terms of like, what did I feel about the episode? I thought that part of it is really interesting. And I think it adds a layer of complexity to Odo, who is like both a child and a monster at the same time throughout this process. That made that, and that's actually why the final scene resonated for me. Because it didn't just cleanly like, oh, right, we're both in the same boat, let's go get a sandwich. She actually holds him to account for the differences in their complicity and the culpability in this situation, and I actually really liked that. So the first 35 minutes of this, I'm like, I don't know, I don't really care, this isn't that interesting. The end, I think, makes it an important episode, even if it was not successful all the way through. So in the end, that gets 83 self-sealing stem bolts from me.
Wow, interesting.
On IMDb, it gets a 7.4, which is episode 102 out of 173. So yeah, there you go. We will be back next week with the episode The Ascent, which is the
I've
last.
been promised the next 3 are good.
Yeah,
Really?
well, we've got. Oh, that's interesting. Anyway, so next episode will be the last episode before First Contact. So, last episode with our old uniforms before we hit the legendary uniforms that I love so much. I'm more excited about that than anything else coming up this season. So, really, really fun. I want to know what you have to think about this episode. Leave it in the YouTube comments below. While you're at it, if you haven't already, give it a like, give it a subscribe, tell a friend. If you're listening to the podcast-only version of this, do us a huge favor and leave a rating and review on whatever your podcasting service of choice is. You can join our Patreon at patreon.com/K&M. Any final thoughts, Mikey?
Nope.
All right, go be a plaid. We will see you back here next week with The Ascent. Thank you for watching Keith and Mike Watch Deep Space Nine. Thank you for watching K&M Entertainment. If you enjoyed our particular brand of nonsense, please like and subscribe. Or become one of our patrons at patreon.com/K&M. Like I eat out. I eat lunch. No, that's not what I meant. You know what I mean.